Everyone, we are back with another video, and in today's video we are going to discuss one of the most important topic of ANS autonomic nervous system, and that is different types of neurons that are present in autonomic nervous system. This is the topic that holds the roots of the ANS, because after understanding different types of neurons that are present in autonomic nervous system, you will be able to understand different concepts and mechanisms of the drugs that impact different regions of the body through the neurons. So what you will be able to learn after the video is that you will be able to define different types of autonomic neurons, and then you will be able to differentiate between pre and post ganglionic neurons, and what are pre and post ganglionic neurons. You'll be able to understand that. Moreover, you will be able to compare sympathetic as well as parasympathetic neurons, because this is the most important topic to understand various physiological functions of the body. And moreover, you'll be able to understand the role of enteric neurons and what are the enteric neurons and where they are actually present. So let us begin our topic. Now, I already told you in the previous video that the somatic nervous system basically consists of single neuron, and that's why its synapse is quite easy. But when we talk about ANS, so we must know that the ANS uses a 2-neuron chain, right? It uses a 2-neuron chain. Now, what is this 2-neuron chain? It means that the ANS basically uses preganglionic neurons and post-ganglionic neurons. Now you need to understand the 2-neuron chain, which means the ANS uses two types of neurons, the preganglionic neurons and the post-ganglionic neurons. Now, preganglionic neurons and post-ganglionic neurons. Now let us discuss the pathway of nerve impulse, so that we will discuss each of the segment of the pathway individually, right? So what is the pathway? Now, we all know that CNS is responsible for processing all the input that it has received from the sensory neurons. Now, this processed information as an output travels to the preganglionic neurons, from preganglionic neurons the information or the impulse travel to the ganglions. From ganglions, the impulse travel to the post-ganglionic neurons. From post-ganglionic neurons, the impulse travels to the effector organs. Now, what can be the possible effector organs? It can be heart, or it can be smooth muscles, or it can be glands, right? As a result of which the response is produced in the body. Now let us discuss this pathway in detail. Impulse travel from CNS to the preganglions. So let us discuss the preganglions first, right? So what are the preganglionic neurons? These are basically the first neurons in autonomic pathway. Right? They are the first neurons in autonomic pathway, so you have to understand that. And when it comes to their cell bodies, so obviously the cell bodies of these neurons are present in either brainstem or spinal cord, because we know that these neurons are originated from CNS. So obviously their cell bodies are either present in brainstem or spinal cord. And what is the basic function of preganglionic neurons? That is to carry impulse from CNS to autonomic ganglia, right? From CNS to autonomic ganglia. Right? This is the basic information about preganglions that you have to remember. And after that, you also have to remember that the preganglions are present in both the systems, sympathetic nervous system, which we are going to discuss later, and parasympathetic nervous system, right? So they are present in both of these systems. Yeah, they can be structurally different, but they are present in both of the systems. And you can easily understand from the word pre means before, ganglionic, which means before ganglia or before ganglions, right? So you have to understand that these are the neurons that are present before ganglia. This is the ganglia, and these are the neurons that are present before the ganglia, right? So these are preganglions. Now let me tell you one of the most important thing about preganglions, and that is what type of neurotransmitter is released by preganglionic neurons. Then you have to remember that preganglionic neurons always release acetylcholine. ACH, right? So they are always responsible to release acetylcholine. Either they are present in sympathetic nervous system or they are present in parasympathetic nervous system. The preganglions will always release acetylcholine. This is what you have to remember about preganglionic neurons. Let us move towards the next part of the ANS pathway, and that is ganglia. Now, what is ganglia? These are basically the neuronal cell bodies, right? And they are located in CNS, right? So they are present ganglia. Ganglia are the neuronal cell bodies, and where are they present? What is the location of ganglia? So they are always located outside CNS, right? As we were discussing the pathway, so we knew that after the CNS, the impulse is traveled to the preganglions, right? Then the impulse is traveled to the ganglia. So obviously the cell bodies of the preganglions were present inside CNS. Then it is impossible for the ganglia to be present inside the CNS. That's why ganglia are located outside the CNS, right? So now, what is the function of ganglia? Now basically the ganglia is the relay station between two types of neurons, pre and post-ganglionic neurons. Right? Now most of the students get confused that what is the relay station. So let me make it clear to you that relay station is a place where signal is either received or processed and then passed to the next neuron, which means that this is a station where the impulse that is received from preganglionic neuron is basically processed and then passed to the next neuron, that is the post-ganglionic neuron, right? So this is what you have to understand. And then what are the types of ganglions? So just as we discussed that the preganglions are present in both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, just like that you have to remember that there are two types of ganglia. First one is the sympathetic ganglia, and the second one is parasympathetic ganglia. Sympathetic, the one that is present in sympathetic nervous system, and parasympathetic, the one that is present in parasympathetic nervous system, right? Now let us move towards another component of the ANS pathway, and that is the post-ganglionic neuron. Now what are the post-ganglionic neurons? The name suggests that post means after and ganglions means ganglia, which means these are the neurons that are present after the ganglia. So these are the neurons that are present in autonomic ganglia, These are not present as a whole, rather the cell bodies of these neurons are present in autonomic ganglia, right? They are the second type of neurons in the ANS pathway. So let me draw a quick pathway for you. This is the information that is traveling from CNS. These are the preganglionic neurons. Now this is the ganglia, right? And these are the cell bodies of the post-ganglionic neurons, and that's how they are present in autonomic ganglia. These are the cell bodies and they are present within this autonomic ganglia, right? Now what is the function of post-ganglionic neuron? Basically, post-ganglionic neuron helps to transmit signals from ganglia to the target organs. Now here we are reaching towards the end of our pathway, which means that it transmits the impulses, signals from ganglia to effector organs. Which means that it can transmit the impulse or signals from ganglia to different effector organs like heart, glands, smooth muscles, or other regions of the body, other organs of the body, right? Just as the preganglionic neurons were present in both the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, you also have to remember that postganglionic neurons are also present in sympathetic nervous system as well as parasympathetic nervous system. Now let us discuss the sympathetic neurons in detail. Now, what are the sympathetic neurons? Sympathetic neurons are basically also known as thoracolumbar division, right? Because these are the neurons that originate from spinal cord segments. And from which segments? So you have to remember that these neurons originate from thoracic region, right? From thoracic region to from the first segment of thoracic region to the second segment of lumbar region, which means that if thoracic region has T1 to T12 segments and lumbar region has L1 to L2 segments, then it means that they originate from the 14 segments of spinal cord. Now let us talk about the characteristics of sympathetic neurons. What are the characteristics? Basically, as I already told you, that preganglionic neurons and postganglionic neurons both are present in sympathetic neurons as well as parasympathetic system. Then obviously that it has preganglionic neurons and postganglionic neurons, right? So what is the basic difference between both of the neurons that are present in sympathetic nervous system? Collectively, both of them form the sympathetic neurons, right? Remember that the preganglionic fibers are short, but they are highly branched. But when we talk about the post-ganglionic neurons, then we have to remember that they are long, right? Unlike preganglionic neurons, post-ganglionic neurons are long, right? And preganglionic neurons are highly branched, and they're branched to the postganglionic neurons. Now let me tell you about this diagrammatically, that if this is the preganglion, right, it is short but it can be highly branched, which means that several postganglionic neurons can be attached to it, and then they can innervate in different effector organs to produce the diffuse response, which means widespread response within the body. So the question is, why branching is important? It is important because preganglionic neurons synapse with many of the postganglionic neurons, and that causes the widespread response within the body, and multiple organs are activated simultaneously. That we can also observe in the sympathetic nervous system, or when there is fight or flight situations, because many of the organs respond at the same time, and diffused response is produced within the body. Now here, let me tell you a key point, that the preganglionic neurons of the sympathetic nervous system, or the sympathetic neurons, also basically affect the adrenal medulla. The question is how? Basically, preganglionic fibers directly stimulate adrenal medulla because it does not have any postganglionic fiber. So unlike other target organs like heart, blood vessels, it doesn't have postganglionic neuron, and then the hormones are directly released from adrenal medulla after being stimulated from the preganglionic neurons into the blood, and that causes the widespread seismic fight or flight response. Now let us discuss the parasympathetic neurons. Basically, they are also known as craniosacral division because these neurons are originated in brain and obviously sacral region of the spinal cord. In brain, where cranial nerves, and how many cranial nerves? 4 types of cranial nerves: C3, C7, C9 and C10. This is the oculomotor nerve, this is the facial nerve, this is the glossopharyngeal nerve, and this is the vagus nerve, right? So now let us discuss the second origin. This was the first one and this is the second one. The second origin is sacral region of spinal cord, and this sacral region of spinal cord from S2 to S4, right? So these are all these regions from which the parasympathetic neurons are originated, and then they emerge through the pre and post-ganglionic neurons and travel to the effector organs. Now let us discuss the characteristics of parasympathetic neurons. So basically, still the parasympathetic neurons consist of preganglionic neurons and post-ganglionic neurons, right? So they are structurally different from each other in a way that preganglionic neuron fibers or preganglionic fibers are long, whereas postganglionic fibers are short, right? So this is the basic difference between the pre and postganglionic neurons of sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. Let me draw this for you. Here you can see the preganglionic neurons, which arise from craniosacral region of the brain and spinal cord. So the preganglionic neurons are quite long, right? And then you have to remember the postganglionic neurons of the parasympathetic system, that after the ganglia they are quite short, and that's why they are present near the effector organ. For example, when I talk about eye, right, so they are present near the effector organs, right? So the ganglia and the postganglionic neurons, ganglia are present either near the target organs or they are present inside the target organs. And when we talk about the postganglionic neurons, so it is quite short because obviously the preganglionic neuron was huge, and after, when getting closer to the effector organs, this is known as ganglia, and the postganglionic neuron is quite short, right? So as you can see from this diagram, that the response that is going to be produced would be more specific, right? Unlike sympathetic nervous system or the sympathetic neurons, the parasympathetic neurons or the effect of the parasympathetic system would be more specific or more single organ related, right? So because you can see that the postganglionic neurons are quite closer to the effector organs, so they would only produce response within the effector organs, right? Unlike those postganglionic fibers that were a lot of them were connected to a single preganglionic fiber in the sympathetic system. Thus, the response that was produced in the sympathetic system was quite diffuse, right, widespread, because obviously when we get frightened or when we get into a fight or flight situations, many functions of the body get away from the homeostasis, right? We can say that the pupil of the eye is dilated, heart rate increases, heart contractility increases, and you can say blood vessels constricted. So that's how it goes, right? So parasympathetic system is designed to bring back the imbalances that are caused by sympathetic nervous system to its original position, right? To bring the functions of the body to normal situation, normal body activities, right? So this system doesn't create any imbalance within the body, this parasympathetic system. It just restores the body function to their normal states. Here you can see the summary of the key differences I told you about sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system and the neurons of these systems. This system contains both the preganglionic and postganglionic fibers. The preganglionic fibers are short and the postganglionic are long, due to which the response is quite diffuse, as I already told you. This type of system consists of long preganglionic fibers, while the short postganglionic fibers, due to which the response is quite discrete and only to restore the imbalance effect of a single organ, right? And it begins from a T1 to L2 region and from thoracic and lumbar region of the spinal cord, while this parasympathetic system is originated from brain and sacral area of the spinal cord, right? And the location of ganglia is close to spinal cord, whereas this ganglia is present near the effector organs. And then we have the preganglionic fiber branches. It is extensive, as I already told you, and this is minimal. Distribution is wide and the responses are diffused, while the distribution is limited and the responses are discrete and separated from one another. Here let us discuss the enteric neurons. The enteric neurons are basically the neural network of GIT, right? Gastrointestinal tract, which is also known as alimentary canal, right? So these neurons or neural network is also known as brain of the gut, because obviously the main function of our gut system is the contraction, because we all know that the acid needs to be mixed properly with the food for the process of churning and then for the production of chyme. So obviously the neural network plays a significant role in GIT. That's why it is also known as the brain of the GIT or brain of the gut. What are the basic functions that are carried out by the enteric neurons? So let us discuss those functions. There are three important functions that you need to remember, right? The first one is GIT motility or GI motility, which means to produce more and more contractions within the GIT. Second is GI secretion, right? To produce HCl and to produce more and more secretions within the GIT, neural network is needed. Third is blood flow in GIT. Obviously, blood flow and the blood vessels are also controlled by the enteric neurons. That's why they are named as or known as brain of the gut, because they control the basic functions of the GIT. And the key point I want to tell you is that a GIT can even function independently of the central nervous system, but because it is highly impacted by the sympathetic and parasympathetic activities, that's why we can say that it works according. So this was all. Here we discussed all the different types of neurons that play a significant role in working and functioning of the ANS. We discussed the preganglionic neurons, we discussed the whole of the pathway, ANS pathway, we discussed ganglia, we discussed post-ganglionic fibers, we discussed the sympathetic neurons and parasympathetic neurons, which are basically in which the pre and post-ganglionic neurons are combined together to form these two types of neurons, and collectively these neurons and then their functioning form the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And then we discuss the enteric neurons. In the end, let us take a quick review of the parasympathetic and sympathetic functions. And as I already told you about the sympathetic system, that the neurons of this system are originated from thoracic region as well as lumbar region from T1 to L2. Here you can see these are all the neurons that are emerged, and they are traveling to different organs just to carry out the sympathetic functions. In sympathetic functions, when the neuron reaches, or the post-ganglionic neurons reaches towards the pupil, it causes dilation. In heart, it causes increase in the heartbeat. In airways, it causes the dilation. In sweat glands, it stimulates the secretion. And there are different other functions that obviously, in fight and flight situations, your digestive system does not promote, digestive system is not stimulated, rather its activity is decreased, whereas the activity of the pupil is dilated, right? Pupil is dilated further. And when we talk about the parasympathetic system, we all know that it originates from brainstem and originates from sacral spinal cord. So these are some of the functions that are regulated by parasympathetic system, such as the constriction of the pupil and slowing of the heartbeat, and the constriction of the airways, and the constriction of the blood vessels. And how you can see this is the region, this is the brainstem from which the preganglionic fibers are emerging. And secondly, it does not emerge from anywhere. It does not emerge from anywhere except this sacral region. So you have to remember the location properly in order to understand the functions properly. So that's all for today. Thank you.